Welcome, everyone. We're going to start. Welcome to the Project Siena breakout session. My name's Jeffrey Schomper. I'm the product marketing manager on Siena at Microsoft. I work out of headquarters, and I have Ben Hodes with me as well from our engineering group. He's the PM, so we should be able to cover a broad range of topics on this tool and really answer all of your questions. Before we jump in, I'd like to see some shows of hands. How many people have heard about Microsoft Project Siena before coming to the Ignite conference? All right, very good. And how many of those folks have seen a demo of the tool before? How many have downloaded it onto one of your own machines? Nice. And how many have actually built an application with the tool? Okay. So more and more hands go up each time we get to meet. That's good to see. And then I'm interested in the roles who have come here today. How many people are in an IT role, an internal IT role in their companies? And how many folks are in a business division, or what we call a line of business group? Okay. And how many folks from like a solutions provider or an ISV or systems integrator type of company? Okay, well, welcome everybody. There's information here for all of those different groups and all of your different familiarity level with Siena. What we'll talk about, we'll start at the beginning, right? I'll give you a little bit of an introduction to what Project Siena is. It's good for us to understand who it's for and what it does and some of the different benefits for the different groups that are in the room here today. I can show you some examples of how different customers have been using this and some of the results that they've been getting. And we'll even leave you with some more information about how to get started and start using the tool or start using the tool with some more familiarity. So we start talking about the app environment like this, right? What's going on? I've had a chance to meet with many customers over the last 12 months or so when we've been doing some early marketing of this. And time again, we hear about there is a data-rich environment out there, but there still aren't a whole lot of mobile applications. There aren't as many mobile applications as perhaps there needs to be to take advantage of all of this. More and more information is being collected, but it's not terribly usable. We see a bunch of companies, and maybe this will sound familiar. There's a big push, and a whole bunch of tablets were installed, or BYOD has put a bunch of tablets into the Salesforce's hands or whatnot. They're not using those. They may be using those for just email and scheduling. There may be one mission-critical app that went along with that initiative, but they're not doing all of the different things they could be doing to benefit the organization and really deliver a mobility solution. And in fact, these people are using the tablets, may be the ones themselves who have their own ideas about what sort of apps they'd like to see on these devices. They take those ideas to the IT department, and I've truly heard the backlog of these cool, crazy app ideas stretches into the years for many of the companies that I've talked to. They simply won't be able to get to all of the app requests that users are having. So what's really needed in this environment to really get this mobility value is some sort of tool that can make these mobile applications that will work on all of these different devices, a type of tool that's easy enough so these domain experts, the business users themselves, can use it to build their applications, a tool that builds applications that are still play-friendly with IT, don't go crazy. And wouldn't it be great if you could build these applications in a matter of days, or even in some instances a matter of hours, if it were that easy to use? And that's exactly where Project Siena comes in. So this is a new tool from Microsoft. We're still at beta stages on this tool. But this is a technology that lets business experts and lets business analysts, lets those domain experts, the frontline people, build applications using PowerPoint and Excel skills that they already know. So they can build these new mobile applications without having to do any programming, no coding required. A little bit about what it's not. We're careful on our position. This is not a tool that's going to do everything for everybody. By and large, we say if you're a developer, you're familiar with Visual Studio or with other development tools, stick with that. There's more capabilities with Visual Studio. You'll run into some boundaries or limitations of this tool pretty quickly. There's an exception or two that we'll talk about later in the presentation, but we're not saying this is the new way to build all of the apps going forward. This is really to build a bunch of the apps that we just haven't been able to get to because it's just too intensive to work on this long tail of applications that users want. And Siena is very effective at building a certain type of application, right? It's not great if you're going to have some extensive database or infrastructure requirements going on this. If you're collecting a lot of information, Siena is not a great tool for that. It is not effective with processing transactions. This is not the tool to use to go and build out a large CRM-style application. But that said, it is really effective at building a number of different types of apps. And we try and put some criteria on here. We talk about on-the-spot decision-making applications. These are apps for consultative selling. You know, imagine somebody in a insurance environment talking about insurance packages and what-if scenarios. You have an app instead of a piece of paper to go and have those types of discussions with a customer. Apps for consuming information, very effective with product catalogs. You can imagine video-based training or lessons plans, get all of the employee safety training now inside of an application where you can even track who's taken which courses, who's passed what certifications. It's a very effective tool for building an application like that. And the last one we talk about are apps for capturing information. Right? We'll see some demos. Very easy to pull in all the signal capture into a Siena-based application. Very easy to pull on the microphone or the camera, pen input. So a site survey is a fantastic example of an application that you can create really quickly with Project Siena. It's a difficult tool to explain just with slides and just by talking about it. Much more effective if we can give you an actual demo. So I'll bring Ben up on stage to show you what the tool looks like and show you some of the examples of apps that have been built.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. All right, there's my, oh, jeez, wow, there's my. Did I break it? There we go, okay, good. So, let me switch over to my computer here. So, like Jeffrey said, Project Siena is a tool to build a new kind of application. And we talked a little bit about what it's not great at. We also talked about what it is good at. The way that I like to think about it is that Siena is really good at creating very purpose-specific apps, right? So say for like this talk, or you have an all hands, or a situation where you might traditionally want to create a document. Well, instead of creating a PowerPoint now, where you might have to create 150 slides to totally capture like some sales data or something like that, you could actually just build a Siena app that would do basically the same thing, but actually connect live to your back-end data. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of Siena apps, and none of these are like killer, billion-dollar, gonna make, replace everything in the world type of apps. They're very, very, very targeted at a specific scenario. Let's take a look. So this is an app that was built by it's been suitably anonymized, but it was built by a large clothing retailer based out of downtown Seattle. You can figure out the rest. But basically, they have these fantastic new PPI displays. I'm sure you've seen some downstairs on the floor, touch, all this sort of thing. And who wants to go browsing through racks of clothes these days? I know I don't have time for that. So what this is really a touch-friendly way to come in and say, well, you know what? I'm wearing blue here, so I like blue. But you know what? I want to lighten a little shade, and so I can kind of create a palette here and say, okay, well, what do you have to show me for this? So I've created a palette, and then I've queried my backend and said, okay, well, start showing me some things. And okay, well, I'm going to look through this. I mean, personally, there it is. There's the Parisian tulip. I'm all about the Paris fashion. So I'm going to go ahead and select that one. And now we can see that actually Siena is suggesting a bunch of different outfits. Because, I mean, if you think about it, this really isn't that crazy, right? You know a color scheme. You know what kind of shirt I want. Well, surely you could start to suggest other things. And indeed, then we have a bunch of suggestions. I love that handbag, so I'll go ahead and add that. Big fan of those shoes, save a couple. And you can actually start creating save a bunch of these different looks. And you can easily imagine that as I'm doing this, there is a clerk in the back. There's a clerk who's getting notified, because as we've been doing this, we've actually been sending text messages or putting orders into a back-end system that says, hey, you've got a customer in the front of the house who's actively looking for Parisian tulip blue sort of things. Maybe you should go talk to them, and you can immediately have that conversation. Again, this is very specific to this company, but it's very quick and easy to actually build an app experience like this. So again, this is not a killer app, but it's a really, really, really cool one. Let's take a look at another one. Similarly, actually, it's a different large clothing retailer in downtown Seattle, but same sort of idea. In this one, another really key part about Siena that we keep talking about is mobile. But why mobile? Well, mobile because, frankly, it sounds dumb to say it, but it's mobile. I'm carrying it around, right? It also has all of these awesome device signals in it, cameras and sound and microphone. But so in this situation, you can imagine that I am a floor manager of the sales floor here. And I'm walking around the sales floor, and I get over to the shoes section, and I tap on it, and there's a line, but it's being handled by the people there, and that's fine. Get over to the casual section, and all of my associates who are supposed to be there are. That's great. But then I get over to outdoor, and I see it's summer coming up, so everybody's loading up on their outdoor, and there's a huge line. And I'm like, oh, I need more help over here, right? So what I can do is I can say, actually, we have integration here with Presence and Link. And so I can go in and I can see that, well, Marjorie's available. Well, I desperately need help, so I'm going to go ahead and assign her to this section. She just got a text message, and her direct manager just got an email that said, I'm just a floor manager walking around. I've reassigned Marjorie to this section. But you know what? The best guy here is Xavier. Unfortunately, I just tap on his profile. He's already busy, as I can see, in casual. That's OK. With one tap, I can actually trigger that same sort of workflow on the back end that text messages him to say, hey, we need you over in outdoor. His manager gets an email, and everybody's happy. And I did all of this just by walking around on my tablet. Again, you want to talk about purpose-specific, it's literally like the layout of the floor, right? But again, this is something you can build quickly and easily with just PowerPoint and Excel skills. Completely changing gears now. So this app, this is a fun one. This is created by a factory cleaning company. And what these guys do is they go on site, and they tell you how to basically clean your factory better. And what they do is usually in this process, they'd come on site, they'd take pictures, they would then bring this back to a back-end system, take down notes, and then you'd later come back and say, well, here's your estimate, and we'll come on site to fix it, right? A lot of pen and paper. This can be much, much, much better. Hello? Oh, wow. I'm everywhere. So tablets. Tablets have cameras on them. Instead of describing something, wouldn't it be awesome if I could just take a picture of that thing? So let's transport ourselves to the dairy plant here. Let's go ahead and, okay, yeah, dairy plant. All right. And I took a picture. And so now you can imagine that I'm in the factory floor, and I've got my tablet, and I take a picture of this tank, and I say, well, you know what? I'm going to tab it with my thumbs here. This is a tank. And I know for this you need to hose this down, and you're probably going to have to scrub it. OK. I'm going to keep walking around the factory, and now we're in the locker room of the milk factory, I guess. And I can go in and say this is clearly a contaminated area. It's going to need some, well, hopefully not down there, but we'll go with disinfectant. Take that picture. Jump around to the break room, and you can kind of get the idea here. As I go in, I can take pictures. I don't see a pump there, but you know. So I can go ahead and take those pictures. Again, after I've collected this information, it can automatically be uploaded to, say, a SharePoint list, which is actually what's backing this. Now, I don't have to describe to the next guy who's going to come in and do the cleaning. I can just say, clean the picture that I just sent you, right? But better yet, when I'm on site with that customer, I can actually say, this is probably how long this work is going to take. Because we have a back-end system that has intelligence about how long the tasks that I just tagged would usually take, it can suggest and say, well, to do this work is probably going to take 3 hours. To do this work is probably going to take an hour. Now, of course, I'm on site with the customer, so I need to have the conversation with them and say, well, you know what, this locker room's actually kind of a mess. So it's actually going to take closer to 6 hours to clean that. You can see that the estimated hours updates, my back-end system gets updated with the quote, and from there, now I can actually have that real-time conversation, on my tablet. So for the cleaning company, this is a massive, massive win. I can even do something like you say, see that bench? Really needs to be cleaned there, or this is the thing, or that's the thing. Again, I've got touch. Why not take advantage of drawing? So these are a couple of just, none of these are killer examples, but they show you kind of the power of mobility and to change these line of business processes. Now this is one I want to show you because we were really excited about it. So it's not just, line of business things, but it's also for conferences like this one. So Toro actually, they're a lawnmower company, as you can, I guess. But they had it was at Talladega, I believe, the NASCAR race, and they have the massive trailer set up, right? And they found that people come into the trailer, they'd want to find out information about mowers and stuff like that, and before they'd have the pictures up on the inside of the trailer, and you'd be handed a paper catalog, and that was fine. Maybe there's a sales associate there. But what they did is they actually built this app on some very nice touch displays and found that I don't know exactly what it was, Jeff, but the numbers went up from 10% qualified leads to, I'm sure we're going to talk about this more, to 60. It was ridiculous, right? Because you've got this app, we come in here, and I've got nice video. I can go in, I can say, well, I'm personally really all about those rotary mowers. So I can come in, and I can start finding out information about it. The 3500D I've been waiting for a long time. So I can jump in here, I can start seeing things like spec sheets, I can see videos about it, I can see different pictures. I can actually come in here and, now this is what they would have seen before. So I think we could all agree that if I don't know how many of you guys are in the market for mowers right now, but if you were looking for a mower and this is what you're presented with, you might be a little bit less enthused than a sort of full screen, touch-enabled sort of video-laden experience. And so that's really what Siena can, oh wait, I need to get the...
Revolutionary smart power technology. Toro Groundsmaster 4000 and 4100 are smart...
Get that sweet marketing materials right there for you. So this is just another example of what we think of basically 3 types of key apps that Siena can build. So this one is what we're calling the browse and consume. I have some data, I want to make it presentable. We saw when I was taking pictures, we call that capture. I'm taking information from the world around me and I'm saving it in my back-end database. And then the other one is on-the-spot decision-making. So in the case of actually the second part of the app where I was in the break room, it allowed me to have that conversation with my customer on site right there. I didn't have to have a process that went back and forth. So these are the kinds of apps that we see you building. And like Jeffrey said before, if you try and build a timesheet, a check-in app, you could do it, but the question I would have would be how can you make that really visually rich? And that might not always be the right application. So that's where you can kind of see what we're trying to build here. So that's enough showing examples. Let's jump into the tool. So this is Project Siena. Everything that you saw I built in this tool, or was built in this tool. So let's take a little quick tour through. So to use Siena, you really only need to know 3 key concepts. An app can have multiple screens. Nothing new there. Screens can have multiple visuals. So I'm going to go ahead and add a slider. I'm going to add an image gallery. And let's get a label in there. And you can see that I can just drag them around just like PowerPoint. Move things resize. So an app has multiple screens. Screens have multiple visuals. And then visuals have 3 types of properties: data, design, and behavior. And in all of these properties, I can use Excel formulas to add logic and power to my app. So let's take a look at what that means. First, data is super important, so I'm just going to add some data to my app. I have an Excel spreadsheet. You can see here all of the different data sources that Siena connects to right now. And we're going to talk about data more in a little minute. This list, by the way, is a very, very, very small subset of what the true power of this is actually coming down the pipe. I'm just going to go ahead and import some Excel data. It's information about some Windows 8 machines and things like that. So when I want to present data, it's really as simple as getting it into the system and then having my gallery point at that data. So just like that. Now we can quickly browse through that whole list of however many machines. So that's cool. But I mentioned Excel formulas. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So here's a slider. It slides. I'm going to go in and I'll change the color. OK, pretty cool. But what if I wanted to add a little logic? And I wanted to say something like, let's see, can we see the? OK, that's clear enough, right? Everybody can read my expressions? Sometimes the screen's the text's a little too small. Holler if you can't see it. So I'm going to say, if my slider value is greater than 50, make that color red. Otherwise, make that color green. Maybe I'm doing a price thing or a quantity thing, and I want to say that as you drag and you go from 49 to 50, it turns red. And that logic is just going to always run. It's just exactly like in Excel. This is just always recalcing. Okay? It's actually based by an engine that is very, very, very similar to Excel. So that's cool. But what if I wanted this label to also pick up that color? I can go into my color here, and I could make it green, blue, whatever. Or I could just say, why not pick up the slider, the color from the slider? Or better yet, why not, we're in random demo land right now, right? So why don't I just do the size of the text coming from that? Or why not even do something, this makes absolutely no sense, but you could even go in and go like the padding size of my template here. I could also go in and change this. And this really just is all about trying to prove the point that absolutely everything in this tool, every property, you can back with an Excel formula to add logic, right? So this is pretty neat. But let's talk about that capture, right? Because this is just some static data right here. Let's kick this up a notch. So I'm going to go ahead and drop a camera in. Hello again. So I've got a camera. And what I want to do is we talked about design. I've showed you some data. Now let's talk about behavior. Because what I want to do is actually have it so that when I touch this camera, it takes a picture. And what we're going to have it do is take a picture and save it to like a temporary worksheet. We call them inside of Siena, we call them collections. So to do that, I'm going to go to my behavior on the bottom here. I see there's an onSelect action. So I click that, and I could write, a formula here, but we provide a couple of quick hits for you. So what I want to do is I want to save that picture when I touch it into this photo. I'm going to save the photo into collection 1. So now if I tap it, took a bunch of pictures, and we can go on the backstage here, check out our collection, so we can see that it actually saved those pictures, which is neat. But of course, I want to be able to visualize those pictures, actually see what's going on. So my gallery right here, now instead of pointing to my spreadsheet of Windows 8 devices, I'm just going to point it to my collection. And at this point, I've actually got a nonsensical but fully working app. So I'm just going to go into preview mode, and everything should be working here all at the same time, including taking way more pictures and all of this. And of course, you could imagine, again, this stuff gets uploaded to some sort of back-end system, and you go from there. So nonsense example, great. You might be saying to yourself, OK, cool, but how do I get it actually out of Siena? The last step is publishing. So for that, what we do here is actually a quick note. So as we're going, some of you might be asking yourself, what technology is this? This is actually an HTML, JavaScript, CSS modern app being built, and you're actually building it in real time. For those of you who are familiar, you can see that I'm actually running Win 10 here. But this is a modern Windows 8 app. Of course, now that as we're moving to Windows 10 and we have all the universal apps, this is actually a universal app that itself produces universal apps, which is pretty neat. I think my favorite comment online about that was, like, it's appception. And I agree. My GM at the time wanted to actually name the product appception. I had to talk him back off that, but it was still pretty good. So, good. So I'm going to go ahead and publish this out. And so I'm just going to call this Hello World. And what time is it? I need to make sure this is legit. So it's 3:41. And I'll change the color, because why not? I love that gold. And I'm going to publish it out to my desktop. And what it's actually going to do is it's going to bring all those assets together. It's going to, actually I didn't have many assets here, but it would download anything that you would need. It would package it together. And what it actually produces is this folder here. And this folder is actually, if anybody has ever written a modern app, this should look pretty familiar. Because we produce basically what is a Visual Studio package without like the .solution file. Okay? So this is, you can go in here and you can inspect this. And if you're familiar with functional programming, then you'd find this very, very, very easy to go in and extend. Me personally, I'm less of a functional programmer, more of an imperative programmer. But you can actually continue to extend this in your tool of choice if you were a professional developer. Because we actually see multiple ways that you can use this tool. And we'll go into much of this later. But it's not just for building. You can build out your app and start with that. You can also then bring it into a professional tool. And because we give you all the source, that totally works great for that. But me, I just want to install this on my machine. So we include this little thing called install app. And what this allows you to do is install it on your PC. You could also create an AppX to share. If you have something like Intune or some other MDM solution, you could actually take that AppX, sign it with your company's certificate, deploy it to your enterprise. I am just going to install it. And the reason that we need something like this is, as I'm sure you guys are aware, there are various restrictions around sideloading modern apps onto Windows 8 and Windows 10 and stuff like that. So this is just something to make the process go a little bit easier. This is in no way, by the way, the final done version of these sorts of things. We're still figuring out how to get the deployment way better and faster. But at this point, I should, there it is, Hello World 341. Click it, open it up. Sure. And now we've got my crazy app that works exactly like it did inside of Siena. And as you can see, it is a modern, universal app. So that's how quick and easy it is to actually build an app with Siena. Now, this is a bit of a nonsense example, but I want to show you one of my favorite demos here. Because, if you're at your next cocktail party and it's kind of dying down and you say, hey, I want to show you this cool new thing at Ignite that I just saw, this is the demo you're going to want to do. Because I know just like you at home have a projector set up just like I do. So, of course, you can do this. So, data. Let's talk about data real quick. So, obviously, the app you build is only going to be as good as the stuff that you can connect to, right? And right now, we have this list of stuff that we make really easy to connect to. But you might be wondering, how does that connection actually happen? Project Siena can actually connect to any arbitrary REST data source. Any arbitrary REST data source. And if you might be thinking to yourself, bullshit, I'm going to show you how this happens. Because it really can do that. And specifically here, so actually when you see here and you see things like Facebook and Instagram and Office 365 and Twitter, we're just consuming their publicly available REST APIs to actually, through an XML definition called WADL, if anybody's familiar. Basically, you can define the connection from a REST endpoint, tell Siena how to talk to that, and then you can go and build an app off of that very, very easily. So the demo that I love to do is around Bing Translator. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to my Bing Translator functionality here. And just like that, I now have access to a slew of translate functionality. And all of these are basically functions that call out to a REST endpoint that I can use. We have a try it button here that allows me to actually try a request. We can see here that this is a nice way that I can dive in and actually inspect my data, see what it returns and how that's going to work and all this sort of thing. This will be very useful for my next step, which is I'm going to build a universal translator that speaks back arbitrary written text. So let's check out how to do that. First, I'm going to add a text box. This is going to be where I type my text. I'm going to copy paste that so I can actually have this is where I'm going to translate my text. And then I'm going to need a drop-down to specify what language I want to switch between. And by the way, so there's a couple of videos of me building this and other similar things on our Channel 9 on Microsoft.com/Project Siena. So you can absolutely check this out later, or I guess watch the recording of this session later. So I'm going to go in here, and I've got my controls laid out. Oh, sorry, I missed the single most important thing of an app. It's my branding. OK, great. Now it's an app. OK. So I can go in and I can type some text here. And then what I want is, I want this text to translate, and I want the results to be in this text box. So the first thing I need to do is get the list of languages that I can translate into. Let's take a look at how to do that. Right now, this is a drop-down sample. What I want to do is I want to go into Bing Translator, and I want to find all of the languages that I can. In this case, I want to speak it back. So I'm going to call my speak languages function. And if everything works well, then when I click off of this, it should trigger that call, goes to Bing, returns that data. It's a table, so it immediately maps now to this list of functions, or excuse me, this list of languages. Cool? So now what I need you to do is actually have this translate the text. I'm going to come in here to my function, my default, and my data. And instead of having it be input text, what it's going to be is, again, I'm going to call it to Bing Translator. But this time I want to translate the text. I want to translate the text into the language I've selected in my dropdown. And the text I want to translate, oh, I actually got that backwards. The text I want to translate is coming from the first text field that I dropped in. And then the language I want to translate into is from the dropdown. See, yeah, it doesn't matter how many times you build this, you still use the IntelliSense. It's just like everybody else. So there you go. Hey, I didn't even realize it was translating before I was even done. So if I want to go into German, anything like that, you can see that it calls out. And so this is using the Bing Translator functionality. Sure, I can zoom in.
Does Siena have a font size feature?
It does, Jeffrey. So you're talking about this here? OK, great. So I'm just going to go ahead. And this is actually, so you just saw there what is kind of the point of Siena, right? Because imagine how annoying that would be to get a change request to even upload a font, make a font size a little bit bigger, right? I know that most of you probably get like little requests like that from users all the time. Well, you can just, since it is very much like a document, I can just jump in and just go ahead and make those changes. So this is pretty neat, but I want it to talk back to me. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and add our audio control. Because it's not just text that's returned by services. It can also be audio, right? So I suspect there's probably a function that's going to be useful to me here. So I'm going to go in here and call my Bing Translator. And I'm going to find the function called speak. Now, right off the bat, you might be saying that IntelliSense list, this looks suspiciously nice that the function that I want seems to always be at the top, right? Well, the reason for that is that I've got an audio control here, right? That means that the input to an audio control is going to be an audio type. We know, because of the Waddle definition, that we maybe talk about a little bit later, that the type of data that we know what the type of data that everything returns, right? So we know then that Siena can suggest, well, you have an audio control. You're probably going to want to put audio into it. The speak function returns audio. Why don't we suggest the speak function? And that's why that's one's up top. So I'm going to go ahead and it says, well, what text do you want to talk back? I know that it's the text box on the right. And then it says, what language do you want to speak this back in? Because it can actually do some really cool accent stuff. If you're ever bored and you want to try this out, I'd suggest trying speaking back French translated in a German accent is particularly good. So you can actually go in here and then say the drop down. And if I've done everything right, I hope I have, then when I go ahead and hit play, it should.
Hola mundo. ¿Cómo está Ignite?
So there you go. But Spanish isn't my forte, so let's go ahead and pick, say Korean.
전 세계 여러분 안녕하세요. 저만은 어떻게?
I assume that is correctly translated. I personally do not know. Yeah, actually, so the reason, by the way, that I found this out is because when you go in here, you can, if you say, did the, whoops, messed that up. So when you come in here, you're translating the text, right? Do that. But if you were to have this speak this back in the accent, what you can actually do is, let's try this out.
전 세계 연합 HELLOWRLD.
So I guess it's funny because I think that what that was trying to do there is actually speak back the English in the specific Korean dialect. So that's what you can start to kind of mess around with it. But anyway, so this is a good example of how you can throw together services, link them all together, and actually create something using functionality that's well beyond what you actually are going to have, on your machine there, right? Cool. So let's see here. I'm going to show one more demo, which is, you guys might have seen this online, but it's really cool to see a full app being built from scratch, and I should be able to do this in like 3 or 4 minutes. So normally I'd say time me, but I've often found when I do that, I blow right through it, so don't time me. I'll time myself. But what I want to build now is an app for an admin. So inside of Microsoft, I don't know about you guys, but we have like a PC refresh cycle, where every 2 years, for some reason, we ask engineers, what computer would you like? And then it's this whole big crazy rush to try and get all the newest, greatest ThinkPads or whatever, right? So to help facilitate that and make our admins' lives a little easier, we built an app with them that was a PC selector, a PC refresh scenario, which would allow you to browse machines and then select them and kind of create like a little bit of a device mix. So the first thing in this is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add that data into my app. Really quickly now I'll actually go into this data. We can see that I have a table here that has information about actual manufacturers of devices. We'll use that as a filter later. Here's a table of information about all the devices. This information is a little out of date, so don't worry about it too much. And then we have another table that I can use here for filtering.
Can you show the Excel real quick?
Absolutely, thank you. So about Excel. Let's see if this actually works out from Siena. Nah. I'm running, as you can tell, I'm running beta software on a Windows 10 build in Parallels on a Mac. So no one will ever claim that I do not dog food for the company. Say that. But there can sometimes be little quirks here and there. Let's go ahead and go to my desktop. Yeah, exactly. But then I can just blame it on anything in the stack, right? It's not my fault. Okay. So we use Excel a lot because it's the best thing to work at usually when you're at conferences and you're not sure how the Wi-Fi connection is going to be working. But this could be, the nice thing about Siena is once you bring data in, Siena treats data the exact same no matter where it came from. So Excel data is going to work the exact same as SharePoint data. It's just tables inside of Siena. So here we have a table of the PC info, the category info. We see the links actually out to, let me zoom in, that's kind of small. Where's my, okay, there we go. So we can see that we have a table. And that's all Siena really looks for, is actual tables inside of Excel documents. So these don't have to be on different sheets. I just had them on a different sheet. If we take a look at this sheet, this is all the information now we have about the machines. And then this is the information we had about the manufacturers. Very straightforward, very simple. This is my favorite way actually to start building an app. Even if I'm about to connect to some super complicated backend, I'll just mock it up inside of Excel because you can get going really, really, really quick, right? Cool. Let's jump back into the tool. So I've got this data imported now. So let's start building an app. I'm going to go ahead and, again, branding, most important thing in any app. So I'm going to go ahead and add a rectangle for a nice little header here. I'm going to set it to some beautiful Ignite colors. Love that goldenrod. Now I'm going to add a gallery to actually visualize the data. And we saw here is that instead of picking the image gallery like last time, I actually picked a gallery with text. And then I'm going to go ahead and point that to the devices table that I just imported. And I just showed you something that Siena is very, very, very good at, which is guessing at what you want to do. So that table had an image in it, and it had a bunch of text fields. My gallery had an image and 2 text fields. So it said you probably want the image to point to the image, you probably want the text field to point to the text field. This is very similar to the audio control. It said, well, you probably want to put audio here. So I'm just trying to make this as easy as possible. But it guessed it was a little wrong, unfortunately, because I don't really want the name of the manufacturer there. That's not going to be too useful to me. What I want is I actually want that to be the model, so I can just change that binding. And I don't really want that to tell me what type of device it is. I can see that. So I'll go ahead and I'm just going to change this to like the price or something like that. But you know what? That really doesn't look like a price to me, so let's add a little formatting. So I'm going to go in here, and since I'm familiar with Excel and formatting functions like this, I can just use my text format, because I do not really want to reinvent a function language here. So I want you to be able to go and say, hey, I need to know how to format something. And then you should say, how would I do that in Excel? And it should work inside of Siena. If it doesn't, please hit me up on the forums, because I need to make sure that that works so that I don't have to rewrite like 20 years of function documentation. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say that I want to format this, number, comma, number, dot. And so now it looks a little bit formatted like a price. But I had mentioned this is a PC refresh scenario, right? And I don't really want my employees going in and purchasing these super, super expensive machines. I'll probably let them, but I at least want to make them feel a little bit bad about it. So I'm going to use some of that conditional formatting that I showed earlier with the slider. I'm going to go in here and go to my fill for that price. And I'm going to say that if the price, because now we're in a gallery, which means that, so you can think about it like this. There's a gallery. The gallery is bound to the table. Each individual, we define a template, and then that template iterates over each row in that gallery. And that's how we can see, in the table, excuse me. That's how you can see the gallery go, left to right. And that means that when I'm actually editing a template, I have access to all the columns in that spreadsheet or in my table. So I just get access to the price data. So I can say that if the price is greater than 700, make that color red, otherwise make it green. And now, just with that one statement, every single one in here, I can immediately tell if it's more expensive or less expensive. So this is cool, but now I said that I want a little bit of a filtering to go on here. So let's go ahead and build those filters. The first filter I want is on the manufacturer. So I'm going to drop in a vertical image gallery. I'm going to point it to my OEM table. Do a little, I'm going through this a little quick, but it's okay. You can slow it down later. I'm going to change the from fill to fit, because I want to be able to see my stuff a little bit better. I'm going to kind of drag this around, put this over here. This is, by the way, super exciting to watch. It's like watching paint dry or watching somebody build a PowerPoint presentation. Take your pick. But the whole point now is I'm starting to kind of get there. And what I want to do is now I want to filter this table based on what I select in the left table. So right now I'm just showing every device, but I want to filter my devices so that the manufacturer, that's a column, you can inspect the data in the backstage, so that the manufacturer is equal to that second gallery on the left. What I've selected, it's a keyword that we have for galleries that says this is what you've touched last. The top item is always selected by default. It's gallery 2, bang selected, bang manufacturer. And now I've got a simple filter, so I'm going to go into preview mode. And you can see that as I go and I switch between, say, Dell or Asus or Acer, the machines update immediately, because that filter, again, just like in Excel, it's all just kind of expressions pointing at each other, right? That's all there is to it. Last, I want to add another filter to the top here, and it's going to be on the type of device. So again, I'm just going to add an image gallery. I already have this table ready for me here. If I didn't, you could very easily imagine just at this point I would stop, drop into Excel, mock up my Excel data, re-import it, and just kind of do this process back and forth. It's real low cost, right? And I try and make this as painless as possible if you're making mistakes, because you're supposed to be playing with the tool. So again, I'm going to come in here, and for this guy, I like to do center, so I can make sure that everything fits. Actually, I want to just do some resizing, make the template a little bit bigger, and do stuff like this. If you're a perfectionist, that can be kind of rough. Cool. And I'm just going to extend my filter as before. So I'm going to go in, go to items, and so I've already got this expression. I'll zoom in on this guy. And now it's just Boolean logic. So I want to say filter my devices table, where the manufacturer is equal to the manufacturer of the gallery I selected on the left, and where the device type is equal to that gallery on the top, selected, and I should find then a PC category. So at this point, zoom out, should be able to go and say, well, if I tap a laptop, I want to see all the HP laptops, I want to see all the HP all-in-ones, I want to see all the HP tablets. So I've got two relatively, in the system it's simple filters, but I think if if you were to go in and build this yourself, it would probably take a little bit of time to actually save all these variables, do the setting, the checking, the filtering, and all this sort of thing. Siena makes that really easy. So one final little thing here. I mentioned this is a PC refresh scenario. One of the most important things about the PC refresh is actually buying the things. So I'm going to come in here and give a little bit of space. And I'm going to expand my template a little bit here. And I'm actually going to go in and add a checkbox. Where's my checkbox? That allows me to actually save these things into a collection, temporary collection, for review later. So I'm going to go in that checkbox. I'm going to add a behavior to it where I can say on check of the checkbox, collect this item into a temporary collection. And then similarly on uncheck, I want to remove in that same collection this item. And so now, again, if I just jump into preview mode, I don't have to keep jumping into preview mode, by the way. It just makes it easier to click on things. I'm going to save that one. We're going to filter on, check out some of these laptops here. And now if we jump in the collections backstage, we can actually see that those items have been saved into a temporary collection, which allows me to then do something like this. Add a button to go to a second screen here. We're going to call this device mix. I'm going to add a second screen. I'm going to add a navigate action to move to that second screen. Again, Siena's guessing that I probably want to move to the next screen. I could have written this function myself, but why bother? And then, before I go to that next screen, I'm going to use Siena's most powerful feature, copy-paste. Copy, and paste. And actually, we can see now that this gallery is still showing the results of the filter because every control in a Siena document is actually referenceable across the entire document. So it makes things like this really easy. But I didn't actually want to visualize the same stuff on the last screen. I wanted to visualize the stuff in my collection. So all I have to do is point it at the collection. And Siena knows how to format everything because I didn't have to change anything. I don't need that checkbox anymore. But what I do want is to say how many of each device do I want to buy. You can imagine this is the admin. They've received a bunch of the different requests, and they're like, well, I need to buy this, how much? And they're going to see how much that would actually cost all up. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to add a slider. And this will be my quantity slider. And I'm going to change the max from 100 because I think that is a few too many devices of each type to pick. And we can go in now. We see that that kind of click stops there. And finally, I want to see add a way to actually see what the total price of these things is going to be. So I'll add a label. And then using my Excel skills, I'll say, well, what I want to do is I want to sum up over each machine. I want to multiply the price of that machine times the quantity, which I've represented with this slider. So the only thing you need to know here is that there's a special property that we've added to this gallery called all items. And what I can do then is I'm going to say I'm going to sum over my gallery table and return all items that are the result that are in that table. Over all of these items, what I want to do is I want to take the price, multiply it by the slider value. And there you go. I can actually do similar formatting as before. I'm lazy, so I'm just going to add a dollar sign. But you get the idea. And then you can come in here and you can do something like go to Design, Text, make that nice and big. So you can see exactly how much money the company is spending on this ridiculous mix of devices. And there you go. So, oh wait, no, one more thing. I got to add a back button, because otherwise you get stuck on that screen, right? Cool. A little color never hurt. And then navigate back to, again, there's no more screens. There's no third screen, so Siena says you probably want to navigate back to your first screen. Cool. Preview it. And I've got an app. I'm going to go ahead and publish this out, install it on my machine. You could then put that on a zip drive. You could walk around with it. You actually install it anywhere. It's going to work beautifully anywhere that you bring it. Actually, yeah, question. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah, no, I'll take applause. I'm not above that. Thank you. Thank you. One quick question, and then we'll keep going. Yeah. So what we do really well is connecting to backend systems that already exist for things like this. So when I mentioned that it can connect to SharePoint data or anything else like that, what we would actually say would be a great way to do that would be you can actually have very quickly, there's a SharePoint update button that I can actually have here. If this was backed by something like a SharePoint list, I could very easily write back this information into that SharePoint list, giving you the full power of whatever BI tool or suite that you want to be able to run those reports on, for sure. Great. So rather than actually publish this out, we've already seen it. At this point, let's save the questions to the end just because I know there's going to be a lot of them. So at this point, I actually want to say thank you. And I'm going to jump back out to talk about how we've actually had customers in the live today actually taking advantage of and building these wonderful Siena apps. So thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks. And the last point I want to make, everything that Ben showed you, you can go home to your offices and recreate. This isn't a future look. This is the technology as it stands right now. This is a free download through the Windows Store. You can do all of those different demos and all of the functionality that Ben just demonstrated. So hopefully with that demo, you're having some thoughts about how you might use this or who in your organizations might be interested in this tool. We see a couple different benefits. This is how we're positioning the tool. The users of this authoring tool we think are the power users of the business analysts, people inside the company who are maybe working with a lot with Excel right now, maybe working with Access databases or with SharePoint, but folks who know where the information sits around their company are the great ones to use this authoring tool and start building the applications. There's also some benefits to IT, right, to offload the resources of IT. What we've seen some companies do with this, I mentioned that backlog of years' worth of tiny little apps that the user teams would like to have. IT can turn this around now. IT can be just accountable for providing the data streams. You saw the product catalog applications. IT can say, here's the deal. We'll make a data stream available with all of our product information. We'll keep it updated. We'll maintain that. That's what we'll provide. And then it's up to the lines of business groups to build the applications and update their catalogs for spring, fall, winter collections or what have you. But they're the ones building the applications now. And they'll know that application will be stable because the data feed behind it will remain constant and updated. Some more information for IT teams as well. We mentioned this a little bit, but manageability. When Ben got to that AppX file that he showed you, it was really no longer a Siena-based application. It was a Windows 8 app or an HTML JavaScript app. So your manageability will be with any solution that you've got to manage your mobile applications and deploy them. Windows Intune would be the Microsoft solution, but AirWatch or Mobile Iron are other tools that you could use to manage these applications. The apps are extensible, so you can take the file out of this that either like an internal development team built or a line of business person built and load it into Visual Studio or some other sort of development tool and inspect that code line by line, see exactly what's in there, even make some edits or adjustments, start your work in Project Siena, and if there's more functionality that you want to build into it that can't be accommodated with Siena, plug it into Visual Studio and you can keep working on that application. And once you make those edits in a tool like that, it's a one-way trip. You can't go back into this graphic user interface of Siena, but you can add additional functionality or inspect that application. And then here's the point, right? IT can now offload with the data services, offload the actual development work, and just supply the information needed to build those applications, right? I've heard from IT groups as there's a big concern. I'm not going to know what applications are existing in my company when we go and do this. We might have an intern build something and then have it, the intern disappears and now I've got 50 users on a particular application. No, if you can just manage that data stream, guarantee that that will be updated, let the users build whatever sort of application that they want to on top of that. Let's come back to that Toro example that Ben showed. This was really neat. This is, as Ben said, the Toro team built this application and really used it in a real-world example when they were engaging customers. It's really interesting to pick this apart and think about who was building this. I got to meet the two individuals at Toro who built this application. They're not in the IT group at all. They're in a marketing communications group, an outbound marketing group. Neither of them had any development expertise whatsoever. They had a little bit of design expertise. They'd done a little bit of HTML and websites back in the day, and that was all that they needed to produce that beautiful-looking application. And it's really interesting. The actual development work on that, of working with the Siena tool to make it happen, was less than a week to build that application. And they had all of those beautiful assets, all of the videos and all of the images were already collected, but they were kind of sitting dormant, right? They didn't have many ways to show that off to their customers, but this application was a fantastic way to pull it all back in together. The way that they've been doing this event, they did this NASCAR sponsorship year in and year out. In the previous years, it was handing out flyers. Here's a paper catalog of what we've got. So when they went with this application, they had a bunch of people walking around with Surface devices. They had a big 80-inch PPI. Lots more traffic was coming into the booth. I think they automated a lead capture on those devices as well. They've told me that they got triple the leads using this application approach as opposed to using a paper approach. So huge business results. When you take something that you never would have done, this was an example of you never would have built an app, at least not with the traditional processes to do this, but with the Siena tool, you can. You imagine, I think they threw this together within like 3 or 4 weeks before the event. If you had this idea 3 or 4 weeks before the event and you didn't have a tool like that, forget about it. You'd never have the time to build the application, but you can respond that quickly with this tool. We see some other uses, right? Remember, it's a production quality app. This may still be a beta tool that we've got here, but the apps that you produce with it can be production apps that you can deploy. But we still see some folks using this for prototyping as well. Maybe internal developers, you want to quickly scope an idea. Maybe you're doing some validation work with a line of business team, kind of like the trade Ben and I did. Are the fonts the right size for you? We've got the right functionality. If we've got too much functionality, you can throw these sorts of things together really in an afternoon and then have a much more detailed conversation with the user about exactly what they want to see in this application, make changes on the fly when you're getting their input. And then from there, you can continue on developing the application with Project Siena or some developers might want to start again after they've got this prototyping work done, start over in Visual Studio or some other sort of development tool. Let's speak a little bit about getting started. I've got some resources here. What we've found in working with Toro or a lot of other enterprise customers, it seems like it takes about 2 days to get somebody up to speed. You know, when you saw Ben doing this, there's a little bit of unique syntax for Project Siena, very much patterned off of PowerPoint and Excel, but a little bit of custom work to or a little bit of custom training or unique aspects of this tool. We find that a 2-day workshop is really effective in getting people up to speed on this. And the first day is a little bit of lecture. It's recreating some of the applications that you saw here, having people get their feet wet with the tool. But by the very start of the second day, we just have people, they know enough to start building their own apps and get a little bit of help from an instructor walking around the room. So if there's interest in any of the companies here, are interested in a 2-day workshop, come speak to me after this event. We've got some programs to distribute those to you. You know, that's very much what we saw with the Toro folks. They learned this in a day, and then we're off building this application and got it done within the next week. The links here on this slide will show you where to go to download the tool. Again, it's a free download through the Windows Store. Then we've got some tutorials where you can go and get some printouts and help you walk through some of these applications step by step. You even get the assets to recreate the PC catalog or some of these other applications, and some video training events as well. There's some technical information on the TechNet blog, so you can get some more help with the tool above and beyond the simple demos by going to our TechNet forums. I want to speak a little bit about roadmap information. You know, I won't be able to give you hard features or hard dates. Maybe you want to corner Ben and I after the show for a little bit of, well, we might be a little looser and can give you some more insights in not so formal of a setting. We've been out for about 12 months or maybe a little bit more than 12 months with our beta tool right now. And we've learned a whole lot from this. And the feedback we've got is great feedback on the authoring tool. We've got some insights on ease of use and how to make this tool simpler and maybe change the UI. But the authoring tool has been really popular. The next sort of questions we start to get from about the pain points that IT or these enterprise customers are facing are questions along the lines of cross-platform. If I've got more than just Windows devices in my environment, what can I do to support that? If I've got mobile phones as well as tablets in my environment, what can I do to support that? And I'll just say we've captured that feedback, and this is something that we're evaluating and considering. And then the other questions come, you know, manageability, right? You get that AppX file, and that's sort of the end of the journey with the Project Siena tool. I mentioned things like use a third-party tool or Intune or Mobile Iron. Those will certainly get it done now. That's the best way to deploy these applications now. But we got a lot of feedback of, now that we're managing out of Azure, wouldn't it be easier if there were some sort of manageability tools or hosting tools that you could provide as part of this service? And we've also put some of that on our roadmap as well. That's the presentation that we've got. We've saved 10, 15 minutes for Q&A, but you've seen the tool. I'd encourage you, if you haven't tried it out, to go and download it, get that free download, play around with it, see if this is something useful for your organization. And we'll open it up for Q&A.
And I think we have mics as if we're going to be, so I think I'd encourage you to queue up behind one of these mics here. I think we've got one over on the right, left, and middle. And we'll do the best to answer your questions. Please go ahead.
So you said it produces a JavaScript HTML5 content at the end, right?
Yep.
Could this be used as an alternative to designing SharePoint forms and online forms for SharePoint, because there's a seriously large void for that at the moment?
It's funny. So I actually used to work on the Access team. In a previous life, I actually helped shift Access services. So I'm very familiar with that space. I would think that the answer is that this does generate HTML, JavaScript. That would not be really in the wheelhouse. I'm not going to stop you from doing that, but it's going to be a little tricky for you, I think. I think a lot of with as we kind of go through the history of this tool really is trying to make some things really, really super easy at the expense of some more kind of scenarios to make it easy to build apps. That might be a good example of like, yeah, technically, but like, eh. So here's your official answer. Cool. Let's go over here.
We saw that you use Excel files and like images that are on your local hard disk. And if you package this in an AppX file, where are the images going to, or where's the data going to?
It's a great question. So in this PC example, actually right here, when you go out to publish it, you have the choice of packaging, this little checkbox right here. It'll actually download every asset that has been included in the Excel file. It'll bundle it all up, and that'll make it ready just embedded in the AppX. Now, however, for things like, let's say, that Toro app, where I've got hundreds of megabytes of video, gig AppX files are not that cool. So that's why we've included the option, because let's say you have linked content on like a CDN or something like that, and you want it to stay there, it can stay there. So we kind of give you the flexibility to do both.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Back over here.
Yeah, hello. I just wanted to ask, and I want to preface this with the fact that I do have a Surface and I've been using it all day, but I could see getting this in front of clients and them saying, well, that's really nice, but we have a certain other tablet that's out in the marketplace. Is there any plan to make this cross-platform enabled?
I will make some observations.
Yeah.
I will observe that I have a Mac in front of me.
Yes.
I will observe that as Satya continues to talk about, we live in a heterogeneous device environment, and that as I build these things out, and as I mentioned, it really is kind of like I'm building an interactive document. And as you've seen with recent releases from the company with things like Office 365, being able to actually have those experiences running on other tablets like iOS devices and Android devices, it's something that we've definitely heard the feedback on, and that I would say stay tuned, because I think we're going to have something you're going to enjoy.
Thank you.
No problem.
So it won't work. I thought I saw HTML there.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you just open it up in a browser? It would work.
Question was, could I just open it up in a browser and work? And yeah, probably. Again, so for us, it's all about kind of the form factor. So right now, I mean, yes, it is HTML5. It's JavaScript. You could probably open it in a browser. In fact, what I would say is that if you really wanted to get it on your iOS device right now today, you could do something like open it up in Visual Studio, use a package like Cordova, and then you could very easily cross-compile it yourself. Of course, that is something that's more of the advanced developer scenario, but there's nothing stopping you from doing that, absolutely.
Yes, please.
Right here.
So your example there, you showed that the assets and the data was embedded in the file.
Mm-hmm.
What if you wanted to be truly a data-driven app? It's going to be maybe a data island, so when you can sync while you're wired, when you're connected, and then be in a spot where it's not wired, where you're not connected, actually have access to all the data. So is there a data island opportunity there?
I think so. The question is basically like offline, online. Let's say you're on a train or something. You're doing some work on your app. You might want to have a sync, kind of like that. And that's something that right now the tool does not do very well. But we absolutely know that it's something we have to get really good at, because mobile apps run on mobile devices. Mobile devices aren't always connected. So that whole sync scenario, you saw here, SharePoint. I showed you a SharePoint update button really quickly there. What we do really well right now actually is caching data, so that if you would open up the app, it would connect to that SharePoint list, it would download all of that data. You could then operate on it however you need, and then that's going to stay all locally, kind of with that app actually stored on your device. And then when you're ready, or once the connection is back, that's when that little SharePoint update button, you hit it, and that's when the data goes back up. So
that's if you wanted to use SharePoint. So
assuming
if you wanted to
SharePoint.
consume a RESTful API that required some sort of level of authentication, would you just digest the authenticated user?
Yeah, so right now, the story isn't great. In that situation, say REST API, obviously you have to be connected to the cloud for that to actually work. You would be able to actually, the data would stay on the machine, your changes would stay locally, and then if you tried it when you're disconnected, it would just fail. And then as soon as you came back, though, then it would just succeed. But you wouldn't be losing any of your data or anything.
I was more interested in the authentication. So
oh, yes, we support auth 0, auth n, auth
okay.
1, 2, I don't know, however many things. I want to support everything. Even if I don't today, I want to get there. So.
Well, there's been some difficulties using ADFS authentication, using the traditional Metro apps. So you've gotten past all that?
I can say that, yes, we're working on it. I think much to the gentleman's question over there, you're going to like what we have coming, so stay tuned. One more question.
And my question was kind of similar lines, and that's how it would deal with a dirty write in that situation. If it was coming back to a SharePoint list that had been updated or SQL or RESTful data, is there a way to check that out before you write back? Just think of those multi-user situations where this could replace access on two people's desktops with tablets in the field.
Yeah, a conflict resolution is something that we are keenly interested in figuring out a good solution for. Right now, we do just, is going to be, last in wins, kind of. That's not a great answer. We need to figure out a more robust way to say, like, well, actually, we've got to adjudicate this conflict here. We're absolutely working on it. It's a great question. Thank you. Sure, please.
You're a great dancer, and I appreciate your presentation. At the risk of beating the horse again, any future plans to allow publishing to Azure websites or similar things there?
Azure websites, that's a new one specifically. Let's see, Azure websites. Really, when we look at the tool, we do think that, because it's funny, because this conversation comes up internally all the time, right? And it's this whole thing about focus. And where we're going to put our energy first and foremost is going to be on the actual mobile devices. Now, would that preclude this tool being used to do web publishing experiences? No, but I know that what I want to focus on first and foremost is that great mobile experience. That's not going to preclude you from doing other things, but that's where our attention is really going at first. So I think, again, you'll find that specifically when it comes to Azure connectivity, and do you hear about the Azure, what was it? Thank you. Wow, I really should know that better. Azure App Services. I think what you'll find there specifically when I start talking about REST connectivity, that we didn't get to talk about it today at all, but we can connect to any REST data source, right? Let's say you were running one of these, a new Azure or something in one of those websites, you set something up like that. That makes it really easy now to connect to any data that you have out there. Create one of these little API apps or a Logic app that are now part of the Azure App Services. And then you can actually generate, that creates a Swagger file. You can create a WADL file that talks to that really easily. So this is just a little piece about how we can start integrating with Azure services better, cleaner, faster. And again, as we kind of come together more with the technology, I think you're going to find the experience is only going to get better. Time for one more question here. Over here.
I have no question, but this is awesome. Thank you.
That's an excellent question, sir. I applaud you. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks,
I really
everyone.
enjoyed the time. I guess there's a rating here. I'd love it if you would rate us highly. That'd be really cool. But thank you very much, everybody. Have a nice rest of the conference.